Hey everyone, I'm Clue. Welcome back to my 10-hour challenge. So here on Dimension 4, and you can take a look at the video time. This dimension goes pretty smoothly, so I think it's what, about 9-10 minutes, the actual video, because I've cut out, obviously, or I will cut out, the runs, so to speak, the actual dungeons, since they're very repetitive and they're obviously the biggest chunk of time. But I think one of the worst mentalities I've sort of gone into around or relating to this run is the fact that I'm aiming for every dimension to be about an hour, and that's definitely not the right mentality to have, simply because the later dimensions are going to take significantly longer than the earlier dimensions. So it's not linear, is what I'm trying to say. It's more gradual, where we should be speeding up these earlier dimensions and then just going straight through the later dimensions, but they take longer because we're clearing more floors. And that I'm just setting up the what are they called? Script? Yeah, there we go. I'm setting up the script because we did unlock recharge on our mystics, which is great. That means we can transition to nurses and actually start healing. I'm also messing around with some of the settings because I do AFK a lot, and I get caught out by the pauses on floor 80 and floor 100 when you first encounter the boss and first encounter the janitor, but it's not too much of a big deal. So right, we're hiring 1 mystic, 5 nurses, and we're just trying to aim for the nurses to get to 25, and then we can transition to carpenters. And the most impactful thing is obviously recharge. Through having recharge, we can now sustain ourselves with healing, so this means we can focus more on HP rather than damage, which is another thing I was trying to avoid, but it does seem to be what you need to do. You need to focus on survivability over just direct damage, so I am just focusing the HP relic more so than the attack relic. Anyway, first run done. Super simple. Level 18 on the nurses, that's great to see. Got to 284. It's decent. I would obviously like to go much further. If I can get these earlier dimensions down to cleared in, say, 1 run, that'd be really good, because we can start to save clocks. At the current pace, it's about 2 clocks every dimension, which will mean we won't have enough for all 10 dimensions, which probably means we won't be able to hit that 10-hour mark just yet. Other than that, it's just the usual strategies. We're crafting any gear we're missing, so any shields or weapons. I do like just stocking up on the frying pan, both because it has a dot and also because it gets you those resources to upgrade the kitchen. I'm tempted to think about Infected Edge, and it's actually funny because I'm looking at all these status stuff, and one thing that does not occur to me is to use the injection of Nox. No, it's not Nox, and that's on Dark Mages. Whatever the nurse's damaging ability is, because that has a chance to poison, and dots in this game, I'm coming to realize, are super valuable. They just do so much damage because they're percentage based. So they're by far the best way to actually clear. In fact, you might be able to squeeze out more damage than the carpenters through them, but obviously they're not necessarily consistent, because I don't think there is a way to buff your ability to inflict status, only obviously defend against it. But in that, we're just gearing up. It's pretty much just the same. There's really not much to this dimension, or really for me to say. It's just hire nurses, hire 1 mystic, push as far as you can, and do it again. Make sure you're always topping up everyone. You want to just avoid situations where you could get knocked out for reasons you can't really control. So the worst scenario is a 4-enemy room. We do run out of damage, which means we can't clear the enemies in that room in one go, meaning every unit needs to be able to survive 3 hits, or on average 2 hits, given the statistic of them actually comboing out someone. But that does mean that you need to prioritize health over damage, just because it is, even though it's slower, it is still far better to obviously make use of the magic clock and get as far as possible. So yeah, so we just got armor, we're upgrading our shields, our weapons, just really trying to stat ourselves up as much as possible. I will say one issue I'm running into is the fact that we can't scale our relics as much as I would like. They're dropping off because I am doing the dimensions in best runs, which means I am getting less essence. But at the same time, this run just will not be feasible unless I make use of the magic clock correctly. So it's definitely going to be a tough line to balance, because I don't want to rely on gear drops. So for instance, like the Skull Blade. Skull Blade is probably the one item I hate the most, because it makes the run a hell of a lot easier, but at the same time, it is just RNG whether or not you get it. So you can't really depend on it. The only things you can depend on are obviously the relics, upgrading the tavern. Even the relics are a bit RNG because you need the essence. Now, I've done the best we can. We should definitely be able to get to the boss this run, and then it's just about clearing him. I will say this boss, or this dimension, is really good for two reasons. One, you get, it's like 500 essence from beating the Dark Lord, which is fantastic. And two, obviously, it's the point where we get recharge. Just to sidetrack a bit, so I'll include a little bit more footage while I talk. Recharge really makes the run viable. Being able to obviously extend any run past, you know, any short burst because you're able to regen mana is just going to be so significant. It is the sole factor that makes other classes viable. If you didn't have the Mystics and you don't have recharge, you can't use other classes because then you can't take advantage of the magic clock. So the question that's forming in my head is, do I try and get recharge earlier? Because if I get recharge earlier, then I can start transitioning to the other classes earlier, I can start pumping the damage, and maybe clearing quicker, because using Torment to clear is really slow. I would much rather use Nailed It, one hit every enemy. That's going to still be quicker than using Torment, plus the damage scale is a lot better. So it's this tough little question of, do I reattempt the earlier dimensions significantly slower for the chance to be able to do these later ones? And I honestly, I need to say, I do the math. On average, you clear each dimension, or I should say every 10 floors, in about a minute without a magic clock, just through standard striking. So at a minute, it's what? Through attack animations alone, you take 5.5 hours if you were to do 1 to 100, 1 to 200, every dimension perfectly. So there is some leeway there. Obviously, you can't get away with striking in the later dimensions. You have to swap to, say, Nailed It, which is roughly 3 times slower. So that 10 minutes now becomes, well, it's not half an hour to clear the 100 floors, but it is significantly slower. And those obstacles are some of the things I'm going to have to tackle. And again, the hardest thing about this challenge is the fact that I can't just swap everything on a whim. So in order to reattempt, say, Dimension 4 with better strats, I need to redo all the earlier dimensions. But that's just another sort of thing to look at when we start a fresh run, because I will spoil. This is not going to be the run. This is not going to be the season, as I'm putting it, where I get the run done. It's going to take a little bit. It's definitely going to take a lot of refining. But yeah, well, that's Dimension 4 done. Again, there's not really too much going on complexity-wise on the strategies we're using for this dimension. You know, there's nothing major. The script is probably the biggest thing. But then again, scripts are hard to utilize because I can do a lot better if I manually do it. I just don't have the patience to obviously sit here for 10 hours plus manually clicking through everything. So it's not a big deal. Anyway, I'm just dumping whatever gold I can. I'm not going to bother turning the quest because I have to turn everything else. And yeah, that's Dimension 4 done. Nice and easy. About as quick as I'd like. What are we at? It took about an hour and 6 minutes. What can you do? Anyway, hope you enjoyed. See you in the next one.